Hi, we're back, and I'd like to offer today some thoughts on a word family that is important in the Greek New Testament, and it is the fear word family. So let's take a look at the terms. We have the noun ha-phobos, fear, the verb phobeo, and there's also a deponent verb phobeomai, I fear. And you'll see on the slide, among the Greeks, derived from previous languages having to do with running from flight, terror linked with superstition. You'll see the note there about its link with Greek tragedies and the awfulness or the dread of an unknown fate that is pressing down upon individuals with very little hope. Now, the fear of God is found often in the Old Testament formula, to fear God. So you'll see references there in the book of Psalms. Those who fear him, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and certainly central in the book of Proverbs. Take a look there, then you will understand the fear of the Lord, and that is a result of seeking out wisdom. If you seek out wisdom, you will experience the fear of the Lord. The Old Testament language certainly carries over into the New Testament with Mary's Magnificat. The powerful one has done great things, and holy is his name, and his mercy is to generations after generations for those who fear him. Tois phobumenois auton. It's a participle. And her song of praise that she expresses at the joy of this miraculous conception is steeped and is bathed in the language of the Old Testament. Now, fear is very much of a relational term, and we see some thoughts here about hampering anxiety is rejected, but fear, as reverence, expresses a basic attitude of dependence upon God. You'll see there that often there's a gripping sense of awe with the miracles, the stilling of the storm. We have the expression fear to great fear. We have a verb there, ephabethesan phaban megan. We have a cognate accusative, feared, a great fear. The hemorrhaging woman, when she realizes she's healed, she falls at Jesus' feet, fearing and trembling. She spoke the truth to Jesus because she is identified now as the one who caused some sort of power drain from Jesus. Fear is also associated with Luke's infancy stories where an angel of the Lord appears and a miracle occurs. And fear is so often accompanied by caused by some kind of divine incursion. You'll see there fear of the disciples at the transfiguration of Jesus, exceedingly afraid. Perhaps understood as a religious dread. That's the language of Rudolf Otto in his book, The Idea of the Holy. An awe that is so overwhelming. And the resurrection stories themselves evoke this overwhelming awe. You'll see the women fled. They were feeling a trembling and sheer astonishment. And they said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid. And then, in the various post-resurrection appearances, Jesus continues to quell their fears. Don't be afraid. And they respond with joy. Often fear is understood as reverence or respect. For example, in Acts, fearing God or a God-fearer is used 5 times. For example, Cornelius, who was pious and fearing God with all of his household. Fear can also be associated with the threat of punishment. Now, in Paul's allegory of the olive tree, he's warning the Gentiles about their position and saying, all right, the Jews have been cut off, But don't become proud over this. He says the same cutting off that occurred with them can also occur to you. And so he says, do not be conceited, exalted, or proud, but fear. That's a healthy sense of dependence, that if you become arrogant about your own position, the same thing can happen to you. So this is not an anxiety-producing fear, but a humble attitude of gratitude for what the Gentile believers have experienced in Jesus. Fear is also the correlative of faith or trust. Now, in Philippians 2, 5 through 11, we have the famous kenosis hymn, the self-emptying hymn. And it sets the model for the Christian life, and it leads to a central exhortation. This is a very familiar verse, I'm sure, to you. Therefore, my beloved friends, as you always have obeyed, not only in my presence, but now much more in my absence, continue to work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. Meta phabu kai tramu. Why? For it is God who is at work in you, both to will and to work for his good pleasure. Now, notice down below, notice the divine and human partnership. Christians work out their salvation, but at the same time, God is at work both in a Christian's will and Christian's behavior. God and believers are working, if you will, in tandem. So fear and trembling are also linked with God's good pleasure. The Christian life is joyful. One key text from Romans 8. For as many who are being led by the Spirit, these are sons and daughters of God. And let me pronounce the Greek with you. Pneumati theou agantai, hutoi huioi theou eisen. For you did not receive the spirit of bondage, again, to lead to or resort to fear. That's not what it's going to lead to. But you received the spirit of adoption, in which we cry, Abba, dear Father. And let's pronounce the Greek there. Ugar elabeta pneuma douleas, palan esfaban, Allah elabeta pneuma huiathesias. En ho kradzamen Abba ha pater. So bondage and fear are replaced with confidence and a real sense of being God's, and the ownership and privileged relationship in prayer, Abba. So fear of bondage to the law, and law here is understood as a system of performance and reward. That's gone. And thus Christians don't need to worry about measuring up to an impossible demand. So notice here, fear is replaced by trust, confidence in God. God is dear Father, and we have within the spirit of adoption, that we are sons, daughters of God, and the Spirit also groans. The Spirit is groaning within us for our bodily redemption. That means a body with physicality in the future. And we can be rest assured that the Holy Spirit is doing this in the here and now. One other key text that is often misused. There is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear, for fear has to do with punishment. The one who fears is not made perfect in love. Now, it's important here to note the context. Fear is associated with the judgment at the parousia, or the coming of Jesus. And that's the specific focus of this text. It's not fear in general. Many Christians cherry pick one statement and say, wherever there's fear in a Christian's life, that perfect person is not living in perfect love. Well, fear can be a good thing, can it? If I'm with a granddaughter on a sidewalk, I see her move to the street with an oncoming car, you better believe it that I'm afraid. My fear and adrenaline will make me do something to rescue her. What is John talking about? A Christian who has been born out of God's love no longer needs to be afraid of punishment at the parousia, or second coming. It is love that leads to an unrestricted freedom, boldness, a confidence of speech. And this is related to prayer as well as a confidence in the future. So thanks so much, and I trust that this has been helpful for you.